Today on our 2018 Kia Soul, we're going to be installing Roadmaster's EZ4 baseplate kit, part number RM-522115-4. This Roadmaster baseplate is going to solve the problem on how to bring your Kia Soul with you behind your brand new RV. When comparing this to some of the other options out there, this is going to be the most convenient. Now there are tow-dollies, you could flatbed it into a trailer, but all those other options are going to require you to have something very large to pull behind your RV just to get your vehicle with you. This is nice, convenient, all-inclusive, and all you need is a small tow bar that you can store in one of your storage compartments on your RV. Now it is a bit time-consuming to get your baseplate installed, but once you get that fascia off, it really goes pretty smoothly. Compared to other baseplate options out there, this one has very minimal drilling and bolts on pretty quickly. Only requires some small modifications to your vehicle to allow it to poke through, and it's almost unnoticeable, so it doesn't detract from the looks of the vehicle. Included in the baseplate are some quick disconnect pins. They simply slide in, push all the way in, rotate it clockwise, and it locks into place. This will allow you to hook up your tow bar so you can pull it behind your RV. And what I really like about this setup is because it's already thought out everything that you're going to need before you've put it on. It's got a location to install your breakaway switch. It's got a location to install your 6-pole connector, and it's got locations for your safety chains. Now, while most have places for your safety chains, and a lot have it for your 6-pole, not all of them have that breakaway switch connector, and sometimes it can be a real hassle to find a location for it. We'll begin our installation under the hood by removing the covering just above our core support. There's two 10mm head bolts that we'll need to remove, and 3 push pins. Push pins can be removed with either a trim panel remover tool or a flat-bladed screwdriver. Get underneath the small tab, it pops up, and it just pulls out. Now remove the 2 push pins located on the driver's side. There's a 10mm head bolt located just in front of the driver and passenger side wheel, right where the fascia meets the fender. We're going to remove that bolt. And remove the one on the other side as well. Now we're located under the vehicle and we're going to remove the engine undercover. There's going to be 6 bolts we'll remove, located in these positions. That's 3 in the back, and there'll be 3 in the front. Now remove the 8 push pins located across the front of the vehicle and the undershield. These are removed the same way as the push pins up top. Then remove the 14mm plastic nut and lower down your under engine cover. You can then set this aside. We're now going to grab ourselves an extra set of hands to help us remove our fascia. We'll begin on the outer edges by releasing the tabs. Pull outward, and there will be a small release tab. You can use a flat-bladed screwdriver to press down on the tab and continue pressing outward to release it. There'll be another tab located up here in the corner. This one works a little better if you go underneath the plastic of the fascia and pry it upward. There it is. Next, we'll need to pull outward, and underneath your headlight, you'll have some more release tabs. Pulling up on the bottom helps it release. Once you've got it off, go outward, check for any wiring, as if you have fog lights, you may need to disconnect those. We don't have any fog lights on ours, so we can just set it aside. We'll now remove the air dams from each side of the radiator. There's a small tab in back. Just push outward and pull up to release it. And do the same with the other air dam and set them both aside. Next, we'll need to remove our ambient temperature sensor. We're going to go ahead and disconnect the electrical connector, leave the sensor in place, and then remove the wire from the bumper support. Next, remove your bumper support. There's a 1 10mm head nut on each side, and there'll be 4 12mm head bolts. We'll start with our 10mm head nut. Then we'll use our 12mm socket to remove the remaining 4 bolts on each side. And before taking out your last bolt, just put a little pressure, pushing it inward to keep it from falling off. It'll rest on the studs. You can then set your tools and hardware aside and remove the bumper support. We'll now drill out the 2 holes inside of our frame just behind our bumper support. We're going to enlarge them using a 3/8 drill bit, and I like to use a little lubricant to help it drill a little easier. We'll now install our supporting brackets onto our frame. We're on our passenger side here. The brackets are different between left and right. You'll want the threaded, pre-welded threaded nut on the top when it's installed. Before you slide it in place, take one of the 1/2 inch by 2 inch bolts, slide it through the back side. You'll then come around, slide it between the frame and the black panel here. We'll then take the 3/8 by 3/4 bolts, place on a lock washer, and we'll thread that into the top pre-welded nut. Before you put it in there, put a little bit of red Loctite on it. You'll then use the same hardware for the lower hole. However, since there's no nut welded onto the plate, we'll be using the handle nut provided in the kit. Position it between the bracket and the outer black panel. Line it up with your hole, and again thread in your 3/8 bolt. Now repeat the same process on the other side. Then torque all of your bolts using a 14mm socket using the specifications in your instructions. We can now reinstall our bumper support, slide it onto the studs, and then reinstall the hardware that was removed. If you thread a nut on each stud, that'll hold it in place, making it easier to reinstall your hardware. Now take your 1/2 inch by 2 inch bolt, slide on one of the small rectangular plates, come around from the back side and slide it through the open hole underneath your bumper support. Follow that by another rectangular plate. Do the same thing on the other side. Apply some red Loctite to the 2 bolts you just slid through. Then slide your base plate onto those bolts. I'll slide on a 1/2 inch lock washer and thread on a 1/2 inch nut. Repeat that for the other side. Now take your U-bolt, slide on 2 of the long rectangular braces onto it, set it over your bumper support and through your base plate. Apply some red Loctite before threading on the nuts. Now thread the locking nuts onto the bottom side of the U-bolt. You'll know they're locking nuts because they'll have the little dimple on one side. Place red Loctite on the stud that we installed earlier. Slide the bracket on with the angle facing downward. Place on a lock washer, followed by a nut. Line the other end of the bracket holes up with your base plate and slide through the remaining 1/2 inch bolts. We'll then put red Loctite on both of those bolts, slide on a lock washer, and a nut. You'll use a 19mm socket or wrench to tighten down all of your hardware. When you tighten down your U-bolts, you want to make sure you tighten them down evenly. Work back and forth. And torque all of our hardware to the specifications in the instructions. We can now reinstall the wiring to our ambient temperature sensor. Now we'll trim our fascia at the points I have marked here. You can use a pair of tin snips, scissors, a Dremel, whatever you've got available that can make a nice clean cut. We're using tin snips. You'll then mirror this cut on the other side. We've grabbed ourselves the next set of hands to help us get our fascia back on. Now you'll want to start getting your top on first, just so it's lined up. Then you want to look down below and make sure that everything's going to clear. Looks like everything down here is going to clear properly, so we can continue putting our fascia back into place. Now after we trimmed our breakaway switch, we come over to the driver's side and take a look, and it looks like we need to come down a little bit further, but we can't because our bracket for the 6-pole is going to hit there. So we're going to go ahead and trim to make that fit. And then our 6-pole is going to be going here, so we're going to go ahead and trim this out so our 6-pole will fit as well. And that'll let us come down so we can go underneath of our connection point for our tow bars. In order to complete our flat tow setup, we used Roadmaster's EZ5 base plate, Roadmaster's Falcon all-terrain non-binding tow bars, Roadmaster's universal diode wiring kit, SMI's Stay and Play Duo supplemental braking system, and lastly we used Roadmaster's safety cables. And that completes our installation of Roadmaster's EZ4 base plate kit on our 2018 Kia Soul.